Okay, for this lecture, we're going to talk about Gilded Age immigration. And this is a really interesting topic because we've already talked about industrialization and a little bit about urbanization, the growth of cities, and this period of immigration is a huge part of that story. So the first thing to know about Gilded Age and about immigration in the Gilded Age is that the Gilded Age is a turning point. And if we're going to be specific, we're going to look at the year 1880. In general, I used to just say, this is a change after the American Civil War. But if you look at data, the more specific year is 1880. And what we see is there is a change in the nature or the characteristics of immigrants who are coming to America before 1880 and after 1880. In fact, in the decade of the 1880s, you see a huge spike, an increase in immigration that will continue for several years. And these immigrants that come to America in the period 1880 to this is 19 to 1920. That's right. These immigrants that come to America in the years 1880 to 1920, we refer to them as new immigrants. And from a historical standpoint, we can contrast them with the people who came to America before. So immigrants who came to America before 1880, we refer to as older immigrants, not because of their age, but just because they were coming from a further back time in history. And then people who were immigrating in 1880 to 1920, we would call the new immigrants. Now, immigration will go through further changes in trends and characteristics in the 1900s, and we'll talk about those at a later time. One thing of note, this period of new immigration is the largest period of immigration in American history. I think that's an interesting way to phrase it. It's the largest period of immigration in American history. Immigration is it's a big topic in the news today, and students often ask me, like, there was more immigrants back then than there are now? Well, kind of. In terms of total number, the number of legal immigrants coming into the country recently is pretty comparable, or in some years here recently, it's even been larger. But in terms of ratio of total population, you have to remember America's total population today is about 3 to 3.5 times what it was in the Gilded Age. So even though the actual number of immigrants coming in today versus what came in the 1880s is kind of the same number in terms of ratio to population, immigrants were making up a much more significant piece of the Americans' fabric or portion of the American society in the Gilded Age. This was a very high period of immigration. Okay. At this point, if we were in school, if we were in class, what I would do is I would have you get your notes or sheet of paper, and we would pull out a table like this, put old immigrants on one side, new immigrants on the other, and we would do some research. We would look at some trends. We would look at data, and we would try to make a list of characteristics. We obviously can't do that. So I'm going to walk you through a few documents, and then we'll come back to this table in a minute. The first thing I want you to see is this little set here of like pie graphs. Over here on the left, on this smaller pie graph, you see 1854. So this is just 1 year. You had 427,000 immigrants come into the country legally in 1854. If you come over to 1907, so 50 so years later, in 1 year, almost 1.3 million immigrants were coming in. This represents new immigration. This represents old immigration. You can see that new immigrants came in much larger numbers, and it was just generally an increase. The other thing you can do, if you dig into this pie chart, is you look at where are these immigrants coming from. And if you look at old immigrants, you see Germany, Ireland, Britain, non-European and other Northwestern Europe. So you see some diversity, you see some variety in countries. But you come over here to the new immigrant pie chart, Italy, Russia, Austria-Hungary. You still have Britain and Ireland and Germany, but they make up a much smaller percentage. The Balkans, other Europe, non-European. In general, new immigration and the new immigrants of this period come from much more diverse backgrounds from a variety of different countries. If you notice, if you're coming from Britain, Ireland, or Germany, there's a very good chance that you're going to be white. You're going to have a better chance at speaking English. You're probably going to have pretty religions that are pretty familiar in America in terms of like Protestant religions, Lutherans or Methodists or anything like that. If you're coming from Russia or Italy, Austria-Hungary, you're going to have a diversity of cultures and customs that are much different to native-born Americans. You're going to speak a different language. You might be Catholic. You might be Eastern Orthodox. You might be Jewish. You might be atheist. And so there's a lot more variety in terms of language and custom and religion. And that's going to play a part in the story of America as we go forward. If you scroll down to, let me turn that off for a second. If you scroll down to this chart, this is talking about jobs, labor force, and employment. Again, now, if we look at this, the newer immigrants are going to be in the numbers here at the top of the chart, and the older immigrants are going to be here at the bottom. You see different types of jobs, agriculture. If you go to the old immigrants, you see several agricultural jobs, and then very little in terms of other things. However, if you come up here to new immigrants, and again, numbers are much larger in this period, you still see a good amount of agriculture, but also almost equal in manufacturing. So you see a change in the type of jobs, or if you talk about push and pull factors, what types of jobs are pulling immigrants in during the period of new immigration? Factory jobs and railroad jobs and mining jobs, those are going to be pulling immigrants in, whereas before, older immigrants, you would come and you were largely looking for land, probably going to do farm work or maybe a little bit of like timber or lumber work. Finally, this last chart says percentage of males and children under 15. Percentage of males, and the opposite of that obviously is going to be percentage of females, and then children under 15. So again, 1845, 1855, these are old immigrants. The numbers are smaller. Percentage of males, a little bit over 50-50. So, 50-something percent male, 40-something percent female. Significant number of children, 21, 22, 23%. Now, when you come up here to the new immigrant years, again, much larger numbers, and a lot greater percentage of males, meaning less females coming during this time, and consequently less children. The trend with new immigrants was single men coming either maybe to make money and then go back home, take that money back to their family. Maybe they would come and work for a while and send money back home, or just in general, young single men coming to America as a single and then intermarrying or finding an American wife and developing a family here in the States, as opposed to older immigrants would come as a full family unit. Okay, so to summarize, let's go back to our chart. Zoom out. Much of what I've just said there is on this chart, just kind of synthesized. And again, I'll share this document in the notes of the lecture so you could look at it. But old immigrants, smaller in number, generally from Northwest Europe, more homogenous, which meant more likely to speak English, be Protestant. We didn't talk about this, but more likely to come from a democratic background. Generally, these immigrants, if you're white, you're Protestant, you speak English, you've got a normal family, it's much easier to assimilate into mainstream American culture. Assimilate means to blend in and take on the dominant culture. So, not that these immigrants had an easy experience and didn't face prejudice, but they were old immigrants more easily able to assimilate. New immigrants, much larger in number, from different parts of the world, diverse, speaking different languages, different religions, less likely to have democratic values, more likely to be here on a short-term or single basis, working in factories. They had a more difficult time assimilating. If you speak a different language, if you have different customs, if you're not a family unit, it's much harder to blend in, to get acclimated, and take on a dominant culture. And as a result, they're going to face more nativism. These two terms, assimilation and nativism, we need to know these. Nativism is prejudice towards immigrants. It's a preference for native-born Americans. And many new immigrants had a much harder experience and faced much more nativism. Okay, here's to wrap up. I'm not going to read this to you. It's in the document. You could look it up. Actually, I'll read part of it. This is a poem by Emma Lazarus called The New Colossus. This was written in 1883 as they were fundraising to build the Statue of Liberty. And now today, this is actually on the pedestal at the base of the Statue of Liberty. And this poem kind of symbolizes the American spirit towards immigrants. It's saying, come one, come all, that America is a golden door of opportunity, where it says here, I lift my lamp beside the golden door. That it says, give us your tired, give us your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. America has always been and portrays itself as a land of opportunity for the outsider, for the immigrant. And this was definitely true during the Gilded Age. Unfortunately, living up to these ideals was not always something we did well, and that was evident with the presence of nativism. We'll talk more about the treatment of immigrants and some of that immigrant experience in another lecture or at another time. But this is an introduction. Again, thanks for listening.